And good afternoon, everybody. Chris Bartell here from the Cascade Pacific Council. Thank you so much for joining us today at our next Wednesday webinar. We've been doing these at high noon on Wednesdays for quite a while now, and it's been great. This is a hot topic, of course, because we just announced this week that we are restarting scouting, especially for Scouts BSA right now in the Oregon area. So we're going to dive into that. And I'm super excited to have everybody here. We have some folks here in the chat. We have people who are on Facebook right now as well. And so this is going to be really, really great. So if you have questions, you can actually add them to the chat. We'll actually do a Q&A at the end. What we're going to do today is I'm going to give us a little news and information there. And then what we will do is we'll have Todd McDonald will give us the lowdown of everything that's going on in the camping world and in meeting worlds. He's been doing a lot of work here. So this is going to be really, really great. Just want to make sure everybody can hear me okay there. Give me a thumbs up in the old chat. That would just be fantastic. So really appreciate that. What we're going to do now is I'm going to dive on in here and we will go into what's going on around the council. So let me give you just a little quick news update here. A couple things. The first thing here is the spring fundraiser is underway. We're calling it the Snack Attack, as you can see here. Just having a little fun with our character Bigfoot here. And you can check out all the information there at cpcbsa.org/candy and get all the information there. There's a lot of fun materials there for your units to use this and promote this and share it with friends. It's going to be really, really great. So that's what's going on here. The next thing we have is just a quick update that Cube Camp is actually on hold for now. We're diving into some deeper security and youth protection and all that kind of thing. And so we're just putting this on hold for now, but we will be back at it in a few weeks and we'll have more information on that soon. And it's really, really going to be great. We're really super excited about it. And for those of you who have already signed up, you'll still get your free month of Cube Camp. So don't worry about that. Next up, Camp for All. Camp for All is rocking and rolling, our unit fundraiser. So for those of you who are unit leaders or if you're parents and you want to find out more about just some of the tools that we have, there's literally this time around, we have a step-by-step process of how to do Camp for All and all of that. It's really great. So go to cpcbsa.org/campforall for that and you'll get all the information there. A couple other quick notes here. And let's see here. We've got our February 21st, our inaugural female Eagle Scout celebration. It's called Be the Change. We're also going to be celebrating all the other Eagle Scouts at that time, which is going to be great. March 1st, we have family and cohort camping is going to be opening here. So we're going to have some more information on that as well today. And on June 27th, summer camp actually starts. You can actually go to our website, cpcbsa.org, and see our little ticker there. It's going to be really, really fun. So August 22nd through 29th is powder horn training. So check that out on our website as well. You can go to cpcbsa.org/calendar and get all of the information there too. So let's see here. Next up, lastly here, so kind of thinking about summer camp and all of that, we have camp staff too, which is a really fun way to spend your summer. There's lots of information, lots of different options for youth ages 15 and up. So check that out at cpcbsa.org/campstaff. A lot of you will be receiving postcards and emails about this too. So check that out. Lots of great stuff. And for more information, of course, you can go to our calendar page and our Facebook, and you can get all of the latest and greatest events. All righty. Now, this is the real reason why you all came here. So it's all about restarting scouting in person. So right now, I'm going to hand this over to Todd McDonald. Todd, are you there? Let's see if this all works. You know, always seem to run into technical funniness here. So
yeah,
Todd,
I
go
think
ahead and take it away.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right, fantastic. I won't worry about my video right now. I left my uniform at home. So, but I thank you all so much for coming on here. We're really excited about this. Just a really quick history about kind of what happened. We had pretty good guidelines kind of coming up until the governor of Oregon asked for a pause, actually from both states for that matter. And so we kind of got through the Christmas and holiday period and then really started to dive deep into how we can interpret the guidelines that were there to help make it work. And then in the middle of that whole process, Washington changed their guidelines. And so we're still in the process of digesting all of that and trying to come up with guides for Washington. So if you're a Washington unit, please stay tuned and know that you're not being left out. It takes several it takes a lot of time to review all the documents, to discuss it with experts, and to come up with a position that we can stand by. That was all able to be done by Oregon because their documents were released earlier. And so just stay tuned for there. So we're excited to be able to show how we can meet in person and how we can start camping again. So let's go ahead and get started, Chris. All right, so again, we're going to, I kind of already did the overview, and we'll talk a little bit about our COVID task force. We'll review every guideline as we go through our, literally the guidebook that we have. Chris, did we put that guidebook in the chat or somewhere where people can link to if they don't have it?
Yes, you can actually get it at cpcbsa.org/COVID is where you'll find all of this, but I'll put it in the chat as well.
Thank you. And again, we'll go over that. We'll talk about a little bit of communication about the different rules regarding camping and meetings, and then allow opportunity for you to all have questions. All right, let's go ahead and move forward. I guess click. Okay, first I want to talk about the COVID task force because one thing for those of you who aren't professional scouters is that you really kind of live and die by the volunteers that are out there. And since the beginning of all this, it was important to surround myself with a group of people who were relative experts, or at least people can at least guide us through all these processes. And so I'm proud to say that this guidelines has physicians, it has safety experts, people from our risk management committee. It has scouters just like you, have a den leader and a scoutmaster or two on there, and members of our executive board, attorneys. So, I mean, just to make sure that we are covering everybody's questions. And so, and again, this particular effort was actually led by a member of that committee, which Dr. Kristen Crowley, who is you get to hear from in a little bit, who took the lead of this particular situation, did a bunch of research, and brought her expertise as a physician also into this. So more on that as we go. All right, next slide. All right, here we go. Here's a little note from Kristen.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Kirsten. I really, really, really appreciate it. And so what I'd love to have you do is just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your scouting journey, career, so to speak, and then maybe your real live career, and then we'll kind of go from there.
So I'm Kirsten Crowley, and I'm the Scoutmaster for Troop 797, technically Troop 5797. So girl troop out of Tigard, and I'm a pediatrician, and I work for Providence Medical Group, and I'm just super excited to be here today.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about the COVID task force, your involvement with it, and how you guys came to the conclusion that we could possibly open up.
You know, I was part of the task force last summer, kind of looking at, is it safe to have summer camp? Is it not? And, you know, from my perspective as a pediatrician, I just have watched so many of my teenagers sort of drift away over the course of this. They are just, I think, taken out by not getting to see their friends, not getting to be outside, not getting to do things in person. And I've seen lots of kids with depression, anxiety, all kind of escalate during the course of this time. I started looking at the youth programs recommendations on how to keep things safe. And so, you know, approached Todd and said, hey, is this something we can look at? And so we started looking at the guidelines and how we could safely have scout troops get together and still meet the state guidelines and still really mitigate the potential, you know, transmission by masking and physical distancing and being outside as much as possible. And the more we looked at it, the more we realized if they can run summer camps and if kids can do sports and you know, in Scouts, we are creative and we can do the same things and just follow the same rules and be able to have our kids get together and get back to scouting again.
So, in terms of the precautions that we're really setting the stage for, what do you think troops should, how should troops sort of prepare for it, and what precautions should they take? And also, what do you think in terms of, you've been dealing with so many kids, so many parents, what do you feel like is, what's the best advice or things that we as leaders can just help our parents understand? What should we be telling them?
I think first and foremost is kind of weigh whether for your family doing in-person things works right now. You know, there's definitely families who have grandparents or parents who, you know, are high risk. And so I would say in those cases, opt for the online portion of scouting for now. But if you are a family that is able to meet in person, I think, you know, what we're planning to do is everybody needs to be in agreement about we're all going to follow the safety measures. Everybody's got to come in a mask. Everybody's got to be willing to be in their cohort and distance as much as you can, washing hands, all of those things. Don't come if you are sick in any way because you're jeopardizing your troop, you're jeopardizing the ability of everybody being able to be together to scout. And then the recommendations are to stick with cohorts of 10 or less youth and no more than 3 adults. And, you know, the idea would be if you're going to have an activity that includes multiple patrols, that each patrol is sort of in their own space and not mixing between the patrols. You know, patrol outings, right? Scouting's about patrols. That's really the goal, is to have your small team go and be effective together. And so patrol outings on your own is, you know, an absolute option. And our troops were definitely recommending that patrols get together and do their own things too.
I love how you guys have set that up actually in the guide, where you've talked about spacing, you've talked about how you can map this out when you're in a venue, when you're in a facility, when you're at your charter organization. And boy, that's really, it's really helpful just to visually, I think, see that and understand that most of these places do have space and that we can do things outdoors, which is super, just super, super helpful. And I know for my troop, and we've tried to talk a lot about where are we at with all of this, through this last almost year, right? And I've really found that the communication, we've heard from others too, that just communicating, really having that open policy of how are you feeling about this? How are you feeling about this? How are you kids feeling about this? Do you feel safe and okay about whatever it is we're going to be doing out there? And that, I think for us, it's been super, super helpful. And I know it has for others as well.
Mhm.
So I really appreciate that this guide just nails it. It just lines it all out. It's really great. And I know for my kids in my troop, and they are super excited to get back outside and get playing and seeing each other and doing all these things in person that we've been doing virtually for quite a while now. And so tell me a little bit about your troop. What are you all looking forward to? What are some things that maybe you've talked about or that you hope you'll be talking about next?
Yeah, we've got a lot of things planned. Our troops planned pretty ambitious programs for the year. We're hoping that we'll get to do it all, but we'll see. You know, we're going to take it month by month. And, I know our boy troop is going out to do some cycling this next month. And, our girl troop has plans for some archery potentially. And, I'm just looking forward to being able to continue the adventure of all of this. We're planning on, we did a trip around the Timberline Trail last summer, and so we're going to run another Timberline Trail trip this summer. So I think, just getting to be together and getting to be outside, just super excited.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be great. Well, thank you. Boy, I just can't thank you enough for just all of the work you've put into this as a volunteer and as a scout leader, and just your wisdom and your compassion and your passion for scouting. And it's such an inspiration, and so are your kids. And so it's just really, I really, really can't thank you enough. It's been awesome to have you. And so thanks so much for joining us today, Kirsten. And I'm now going to toss it back to Todd.
Awesome. Thank you.
We're so thankful for Kirsten and her work here and leadership in this process. So she did a lot of heavy lifting, and it was sure a joy to work with her. Again, I already talked about kind of what's going on and the fact that our guideline, and we're going to kind of go through the pages, kind of page by page to understand this. Somebody asked, is it basically the same as we were doing? Yes and no, not completely. There are some important differences that you as a unit will need to consider. And again, it's basically based on, again, Scout BSA or venturing or exploring, Sea Scout age group. These programs, Cub Scout guidelines for elementary kids in Oregon are still more restrictive, and we'll talk about that. We've set up these multiple tiers and a step-by-step process to help you ensure that there's no confusion, or at least there's always confusion, to ensure that you have what you need to get going on these meetings. So let's go to the next slide. All right, so we talked about, and I'm not going to read these, by the way. Hopefully you have them. You can go through that. But you know, we've decided that we kind of bring this into kind of 4 places, 3 tiers of in-person meetings, and then our camping guidelines. Again, the top tier of risk is meeting virtually, and we know that is, you know, eating a bread sandwich. I mean, it might keep you healthy, but it does not taste good. And so low risk would be meeting outdoors. And this is what Kirsten, by the way, specifically recommends. She says, as a pediatrician and all that even before these guidelines, she would be focused on her kids predominantly meeting outside, because it is in her mind a risk level that she's comfortable with. And then finally, we have, because we can, for those units that have maybe a higher risk tolerance or believe that they have more organization, we can have indoor meetings. So we've set guidelines for all of those. And also you can look at, you know, the camping guidelines as we're moving forward. Let's see, and as you kind of go in here, you'll see in each one, you're going to see a meeting plan and approval. We'll talk cohort size, sanitization, social distancing, meeting space constraints, which is kind of new, screening strategy, attendance gathering, which is new, specifically how to keep attendance and how long. We'll be talking about that. Again, participation agreements, so making sure we don't do waivers in the state of Oregon, because they're really not legally upheld. If you sign one, feel free to sign one. But the point is not to try to protect us from the standpoint of liability. What these parent agreements, which we'll talk about, is all about making sure that everybody's on the same page with expectations, and that each individual can make a good, solid choice in how they want to do scouting and what level of risk they want to undertake. And then also what's new is that you are required by the state of Oregon to respond to any situation that involves a infection, not only from your program, but could possibly be from your program, or potentially someone who showed up who was infected or later tested infected. All those things require reporting. So we'll talk about each one of those. I'm not going to go into the details of virtual meetings. I mean, these have not changed. The only thing I would put emphasis down here, we'll talk a little bit about buddy scouting and how that can work for Cub Scout families especially, but it can also work in your Scout BSA groups in Washington as well as a program. So we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about that today. Let's go to tier 2 and 3. All right, tier 2 is meeting outdoors. All right. So again, the plan is to hold all your meetings outdoors. You need to come up with a meeting plan and have that approved by your chartered org and your meeting space owner. Because as an owner of a facility, I have a requirement to ensure certain guidelines before I can allow people to meet in it. Now, your own homes are slightly different. You just need permission and understanding of a homeowner. Also with this, you'll notice that there is a space requirement. So we'll talk about that here in a minute. I can't speak highly enough for the importance, and you would think that everybody would know that if they're in a high risk category, that they need to significantly make good decisions before participating in any social activity. You know, if some people who are at the age range, or if they have complicated immunocompromised situations, or likely to, if they get this, to have an adverse reaction and a longer healing or possibly worse, we should make sure that they understand that and move forward and be more restrictive in decisions that they make. Again, you can have cohorts of 10 or less youth, and no mixing of the cohorts. We'll talk about this more specifically about Cub Scout dens later, and how that they can meet. So, but in theory, there are situations where Cub Scouts will be able to meet outdoors, and we'll talk about that later. If you're meeting outside, you have to take the number of the space you have into consideration before you put people out there. Some people have asked me, why is it more square foot required outdoors than it is indoors? And I really don't know. But that is the rule, 75 square feet per person for outdoor. So that means that if you have 750 square feet outside, you can have 10 people. So you need to map that out in your meeting plan to decide how many cohorts you have. And we'll get to that a little bit. The rest of some of these are not new. Everybody wears a mask, follow state guidelines, and plan activities that allow physical distancing. Make sure that we're doing health screening upon arrival, that we restrict participation for anyone that has COVID-like symptoms or illness. And the guidelines state that if they've been exposed for a minimum, that they should be restricted for a minimum of 10 days. If they've actually been tested positively, they should be, we should restrict participation. They should quarantine for 14 days. And again, in both of those situations, you'll need to do reporting, which is down below. You need to keep attendance of everybody who has come. You need to keep records of those for 6 weeks. If you have an outcome, the state could come back to you and ask for those attendance records. And if you don't have them, you could find yourself in some trouble. So make sure that you keep attendance and you keep track of that attendance for 6 weeks. And in that attendance is who was in what cohort, how many people, how many adults were with that cohort. And again, we'll talk more about that later. Not only sanitization is keeping your hands clean, hand wash with soap and water, or have hand sanitizer with 60% alcohol. Again, you'll need to clean and touch high touch. You're supposed to clean and sanitize high touch surfaces before the meeting starts and in between use. So if a cohort moves from one area to another, we'll need to clean off their space, much like before you go to a checkout stand at the store, they spray off and wipe it down before you get there. You have signed agreements by parents and youth, so to make sure that everybody's on the same page about the guidelines and rules and expectations. One person at a time in restrooms. This is a state guideline, and so we must meet that. Report all exposures or potential exposures to the council office and your community health department. Obviously, if you communicate to us, we'll give you where you can call the health department. You can just contact your DE or just call the phone line here, or send us an email. Again, the outdoor rules apply to day hikes or other outdoor outings. and units must follow carpool guidelines, which we'll get to in a minute. All right, now I'm not going to go over all the same things when it comes to indoor risk mitigation, but I'll kind of now, you'll see that these kind of come across many other places. So again, the meeting plan still needs to be done. High risk individuals, we still need to talk with them. The cohort size is still the same information, and we'll have more information about Cub Scouts in a minute. The limit number of cohorts to meet will be based on 35 square feet per person indoors. Okay. Also, cohorts must be assigned to their own area and stay within that area during the meeting. All right. You can rotate spaces if areas are sanitized before new cohort occupies the space, but only one whole cohort can occupy a space at a time. If activities are outside, follow the outdoor meeting guidelines. Again, mask, health screening upon arrival, those are the same. Restriction of participation, bathroom rules are the same. Attendance rules are the same. Sanitizations are the same. Agreements are the same, except for maybe different agreement for meeting indoors or outdoors. And parents should drop off, but not stay in the meeting. It says at meeting. I know some of your facilities are large enough that the parents can cohort amongst themselves in a waiting area and would not be participating in the meeting. But the state guidelines for a reason. The parent should drop off and not stay at the meeting. And again, reporting is the same. Chris, did you have something that you needed, or can I move on to the next slide?
Nope, go right ahead.
All right, let's go to the next slide. Somehow I got muted, so sorry about that. Okay, outdoor outings. All right, we're going to get into these some details with these two slides, but let me go over them as they stand, and then they're going to need some additional explanation. So I understand that both of these two sections have had some sort of confusion. Again, high-risk individuals are the same. The cohort size for an overnight camping in the state of Oregon requires that the cohort must be the size of the outdoor social gathering requirements for the county that you're in. We'll get into that more in just a minute and give you examples of what that looks like. We're going to talk about carpooling, but the carpooling must be done by cohorts, so not mixing your cohorts. And again, a lot of these are the same: restricting participation, taking attendance, cleaning and sanitizing areas. Again, signing agreements by parents are the same. And so as far as dining, you need to dine by cohort only, and whenever possible, social distance, sanitize, and wear a mask. I get this question all the time. Okay, how do we actually do that? We, cook by buddies and the like. Well, here's how the CDC states, and you can use, I didn't print this in here, but just consider this, is that the CDC is pretty clear to avoid mass gatherings at all cost. 2 is this concept. Wear a mask, social distance, be outside, pick 2. So whenever in doubt, use that rule as a guideline. If they're social distance and they're eating, they don't need to wear a mask, right? If you can't social distance while you eat, then you need to wear a mask. And so, and if you're, if you're outside, it does allow you some flexibility, allows you to be able to take off your mask and the like. Okay, and then let's talk a little bit about Cub Scouts. Cub Scout meetings are currently tied. Oh, let me explain to you really quickly why it is that Cub Scouts do not fall under the same guidelines for meetings as Scouts BSA units and above. And that is because the elementary age kids guidelines is tied to either schools or is tied to daycare or day camp. And all three of those are highly regulated industries. And we do not believe that it is proper to put a Cub Scout den in the place of meeting every one of those. If you would see the book that it takes to run summer camp as for the Cascade Pacific Council or any camp in the country, you would go, oh my goodness, I'm glad we don't have to follow that just to go on an outing. For that same reason, we wouldn't want to try to figure out how to turn our dens into daycares to make that happen. And so again, for Cub Scouts, if they can follow the outdoor group sizes, they have more flexibility than the indoor group size guidelines. And I'll show you those here in a second, but the outdoors guidelines start out at 2 families and 6 people, and then it moves to the next level as 8 people, then it moves to 10 people, and then 12 people. So in theory, depending on how safe your county is in, it would determine, you know, how many people you can have participate in a den meeting. And that's really the kind of the big deals. Now, interestingly enough, you know, when we get into camping standards and the like, these guidelines are do allow for families and cohorts, Cub Scouts, and Scout BSA and older programs. All right, and we'll talk about that here next. Again, I want to talk to you about buddy scouting. I say buddy scouting is where you still have a leader who's in charge. So you have a patrol leader and maybe assistant scoutmaster or a scoutmaster who is, you know, orchestrating an online event or activity each week. And that is your scouting activity. And you're trying to maintain that activity with 2 scouting adults. In the meantime, parents can get together, you know, 2 parents, 2 households, and a couple scouts, whatever that is, to do the activities together, like a bubble, if you will, where they can do these things. And then they can report back to the group on what they did. And as long as there's an adult, a parent with each interaction, this behavior is allowed. Because it's not technically a scouting activity because the unit is not running it. So you'll think of it much like, you know, times when somebody from a unit will go over to another unit's house and they will put together materials for a patrol meeting or something like that, but not necessarily running it through a normal scouting program. And again, this is allowed for in the scouting program, again, as long as there's 2 adults. Again, face mask and social distancing is still required. And again, as we, and the rest of the guidelines are still the same. So let me get into the next one here. And I know there's a lot of questions coming through, the great ones, and I will get to them. Bear with me while we get through the next few slides. So go ahead, the next slide. As you notice, a lot of the requirements are about the same stuff, but there's some very significant differences between the meeting guidelines and the camping guidelines. And I want to explain to you why that is. For us to be able to operate, we had to pour through the Oregon State guidelines for youth programs. And let me tell you that our group had to come in and we threw out some stuff and then we added, others to that. And so we decided that the guidelines that we have are going to meet based on what we found, because there's a lot of inconsistencies in there. So we had to make some judgments from our safety committee to be able to operate. So if you see something in there that seems different or that you think, oh, we can do this because it says it in the guide, know that our guide stands on its own. If you do anything outside of this guide, you know, you're kind of on your own. So now camping, the camping guidelines, as far as the youth programs guidelines from the state of Oregon, all right, are for ages 11 to 18. They're considered anybody over 18 an adult. Programming. All right, so And that programming does not allow for overnight camping. So under youth programs, you cannot go on field trips or do overnight camping. All right. However, in outdoor recreation guidelines, which is how we base the guidelines for operating our summer camp and the like, and if you wanted to go camping somewhere in the state of Oregon, have a different set of guidelines. And so that is what we're basing the camping guidelines on. And that's where and I can show you here in a moment about how those guidelines mesh with the state rules. But suffices to say, both of these things require a step-by-step review of each and individual requirement and an evaluation by our team of experts to be able to come up with what we're providing you today. And so again, we'll talk a little bit about the carpooling, make sure that you're camping one person per tent and the like. So kind of we talked about those things. All right. Let's go ahead and go on to the next slide. We're kind of on the tail end of some of this stuff, so I do want to just jump in here. You can't, this one slide, I wish I would have thought to blow it up here, but if you look at the sector risk level guidance chart, and we have a link to it on that we'll get to here in a little bit, which you can get to this, but you'll see here you have the under activities, it says social at-home gathering. This is on the right side if you're and got your spectacles out. Is again the den meeting requirement list. And if you'll notice, it's only ever basically 2 households until you get to the lowest risk, and you can have up to 4 households participating inside. So as we get kind of moving down the line, I'm suggesting that our dens consider meeting plans for outdoor programming, all right, which we talked about here. Because we do believe that eventually when that comes, if you look at the next level, which it starts by saying extreme is 2 families, right? And then as you move into downward in risk, it tells you that is the number of people who can meet outdoors in your meeting. Interestingly enough, if you're to read the entire guidebook and supplementary pieces, which there are about 4 to the outdoor recreation guides, you will see that the camping size group at like a state park or Scouts camp and the like must meet the status of the outdoor social gathering limits. So that's where right now you can camp with families, basically 2 families overnight. And so a couple families that want to go camping at a park or something like that allows it can do that. All right. But as you move away from the extreme, it doesn't talk about families in outdoor activities. It just talks about people. And so you can have more people actually camping together as you move forward. I wanted to address also the outdoor recreation and fitness guidelines, which it's important to note that this is a facility guideline. It is not an activity guideline. So what I mean by that is that I, as the Cascade Pacific Council manager of our facilities, must follow these rules and can only have 50 people at a camp, 75 people at a camp, 100, 300 at a camp based on the guidance chart, and again, and follow all the other rules. So we took all the important pieces that we felt, since it is allowed to go camping outside if your county, is outside of, you can do cohort camping, once your county is out of extreme risk. And as you all pretty well know, that Camp Meriwether or Tillamook County is no longer in the extreme risk category. They are now in low risk. So now we have announced that not only will we open up family camping at Baldwin, in the cabins at Baldwin, and at Clark, including the 2 cabins at Clark, plus a few of the campsites, family camping can happen there, because regardless of which, those are going to be, just families camping together. However, on the Meriwether side in Tillamook County, which is at low risk, we can have cohorts of up to 12 people. That's not scouts, that's 12 total people. So that can be 8 youth and 4 adults, or it can be 10 youth and 2 adults, but regardless, your cohort side must be 12 people. And I included the Washington guidelines here as well. All right, let's go on to the next slide. I posted these in here so that you can get an example of how to meet the guideline, the requirement for doing a meeting plan, both inside and outdoors. And I'm not going into a great deal here, but yeah, you're going to have to do square footage analysis. You're going to have to identify where your people are going to meet. You're going to want to know where people are going to check in. You need to come up with a plan for social distancing and sanitization, and also about communication. It's pretty much across the board regardless. So that's what these pages are for. And again, we in the council level stand ready to help you with this. I know this is not too different than what we had before, but the specifics of square footage and how units interact with each other, and the new 1 person only at a time in the bathroom rule are new. So I didn't want to say it's the same, because this part here is very similar. All right, next piece. Again, the carpooling guidelines haven't changed. Except, you got to stay with your cohort in the car. You want to do extra ventilation, want to wear a mask. You want to stay 3 feet apart. That's the new guidelines from the state. That's new, 3 feet apart. So as long as you're 3 foot apart and your car can handle people sitting and interacting 3 foot apart in a mask, and the car is ventilated via fresh air or an open window, then you can do that. And then finally, stay home. So you still want to sanitize the car and things alike. I'm not going to go into the how to recruit thing. This was just just to say, hey, now that you can meet, let's find ways to bring people in and invite them to bring. Because I tell you what, it was on the news, and my ugly mug was on the news last night, that this is the best time to join Scout ever, because we're the only game in town. Things that you can do. And so, it's a great time to invite people to join, because people are looking for things to do. All right. I think we're getting really close to the end here, Chris. Am I right? All right. The meeting agreement. This is, again, how you want to do it. We have an example here, and then there's another one. Nose to nose. I'm sorry, I'm trying not to answer the questions, but we'll get there in a second. Okay. So the meeting agreement examples for you. This is a sample. We have a form on the website, cpcbsa.org/COVID, that you can use as an example, and to do those things. And then also here is the in the guidebook, the places you can go to check things out. Chris, did we pass we got another slide? I'm sorry. Yeah. And then there's the attendance form. We've posted this also for you to use as an example, but it's just really for you. You can do whatever you want here, but this is an example of what the minimum requirements are for a meeting drop-off. And remember, you got to hold on to this for a period of time in case you end up with somebody who does get sick, and they may ask for that information for several weeks back. Okay, I do believe, there we go. We're at the question and answer period. So Chris, do you have a list of them so I don't have to scroll up?
Yep, I've got a little list here. Let's actually start, since everybody will, I think we can't hound on this one enough. It's just if you can explain again the difference between or why we haven't given reasons for Cub Scouts to meet in person. One person mentioned that Hillsborough School District is starting to bring kids in grades K through 2. And many daycare facilities are also operating. So if you want to just give a little bit of an analysis on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, and I want to tell you that this is something I brought up with the state in our communications. I guess I neglected to mention that we have, up until recently, the minute that the state started vaccinating people, they stopped answering phone calls and emails. But the guidelines regarding to Cub Scout age kids and all this was something that I particularly have issues with. However, that being said, to be obedient, the guidelines to be able to operate are not, there is no guideline outside of becoming a daycare, becoming a day camp, or being a K-12 school. And all of those things, the litany of things you have to do to be one of those three things is so difficult and puts you at an adverse risk, quite frankly, that we are not approving that type of action for a den or pack to do to participate. There's some questions about whether or not we can follow the guidelines for churches and church youth groups. Well, unfortunately, the Supreme Court ruled that we are not a religious organization. And so because of that, we cannot follow those guidelines. And so if it ever came back to it, is that we can't claim that we are a religious organization because it's been vetted that we're not.
That makes sense. No, thanks for the clarification. It's good for my brain to hear it as well. Let's see. Okay, so here we go. Will Washington units be able to utilize camps for cohort camping? That's a good question.
So, and again, if you're in Washington and you find it differently, I've looked all over and can't find it. So we as a group have decided that we're going to continue on with this idea, this ruling. Your participation of scouting rules is based on the county that you're in. What I mean by that, where the activity is taking place. So there's no restriction in anywhere I can find for the state of Washington or the state of Oregon that if you lived in a county that's affected, that you can't go to a county that's not and participate in the guidelines based on that county's restrictions. Interestingly enough, since both states have issues with that, I mean, as far as, the number of infections, if you were to actually become infected in a county you did not live in, it would not necessarily be traced back to that county unless you got somebody in that county sick. And so anyway, so just long and short of it, our guideline currently states, and I'm open to the fact that somebody's going to find something different to that matter, is that you must follow the rules of the area where the scouting activity takes place.
Okay, that makes sense. Here's a question.
Let me get Dennis Buck here. Nose to nose as far as in the car. So 3 feet nose to nose, because some people have really big shoulders.
All right. So do we need to check with any outdoor park rules? Or does that not matter since we're just doing something outdoors?
If you are going to, I did a lot of stuff in Tigard area, and there's a park there called Cook Park. And if I look on their website, they're going to give me guidelines. And if I go there, there should be signage. So the state and county and municipal parks you need to check and make sure that you're following their rules. Because I, as a property owner, I have a responsibility to ensure that you are. And some of them will be more descriptive than others. If they are, if they're a municipality of any sort, I would let whatever they have for signage and website information stand. However, if I'm going to go camp at, and if you're going to go camping at a state park or something like that, assuming that they're allowing it, then they're going to insist on guidelines before you go there. So in general, before you go to any location to participate in a scouting activity, you need to review the requirements of the property owner for you to be there.
All right, that makes absolute sense. Here's a quick question about snow caves. Are they considered the same as tents? In other words, family members could actually, quote unquote, tent together or cave together, but otherwise you'd have to have separate snow caves for each.
Well, let me let you know that in Scout BSA, family members cannot. I mean, siblings can, as long as they're, meet the age difference requirement. But a parent is not appropriate for parents to stay with their youth unless it's been approved by this council's special needs committee, and we'll get into all that later at another time text me personally or whatever about that. So yes, it'd be one snow cave per person if you're going to sleep in them.
That makes sense. So you can still practice building one.
Yeah.
And then
And you can still sleep in it just by yourself.
You're right. A lot of work. All right, let's see. Let's see. Oh, the meeting log. It doesn't actually have a place for signatures. Do we need to collect signatures, or is it just okay to have that filled out by a scoutmaster or leader?
Yeah, we tried not to add requirements where we didn't need to. And so it needs to be dated, right? But it does not need to be signed and verified. There was nowhere we found that, so we didn't make it a guideline, and we didn't. I think just by keeping a list of who was there and meeting all those things, and also it implies that they were screened and they're fine.
Great. And how does a unit decide or determine which level they're comfortable with? Is it determined by, because those 3 tiers are really determined by the unit, not necessarily by the state, right? So what's some of your guidance you think in terms of walking through different units on that, on deciding what tier they'd be in?
Well, I can't speak for any of your groups, and I would hate to legislate this, but here is what I would consider a best practice. And the reason for the best practice is, I think, something that's inherent to our scouting program. The beauty of our scouting program is that parents get together and work together to raise their children and to instill values together. So whatever group that might be should meet and discuss the best way to do that meets all their needs. And so I would that's how I would ask you to consider that, and just be sensitive. If you have, I know some kids that have, or parents who've talked to me about their kids being, very at risk and real strong asthmatics or something, and they're really concerned about all this. And I said, well, we just got to find a way to make it work, and keep them, mitigate. So if the best way for you to do is to meet in person, then you meet in person. And so, I've seen people who, where the parents showed up with their phone and they interacted as the kid, and the kid is, somewhere, watching on their camera and participating, and the parent is being the kid. So, I mean, however you want to come up with a plan, would be, but yeah, work together as a group of families, because it's the corner post of who we are as an organization.
And here's one more here. In regards to the meeting agreement, is there an example? Like, we actually have on our page an example, but it doesn't require signatures or anything like that. So is every unit just sort of making up one of their own?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have a signature on it. I just had a lot of text, and I didn't want to shrink the font size smaller on the page, but yes, that is true. That I would have them read it and sign it. You could have the parent and you sign the same document, which makes things easier. But ultimately, you want to make sure. I mean, you can see what the issue is. Is you have to, in theory, you have to train everyone on your process. And this way, you don't have to necessarily train everyone. Everybody is just on, sign something, then they know. And so, and that's how we've decided that we've asked units to do that. It's just an agreement. And so, Chris, did we not get an example online of an agreement that they can, a Word document that they can use?
Yeah, we don't have one. All we have is what's in the
everybody, I intended for that. I do have it. Chris, I'll get that to you. It'll be in a Word document, so you can freely edit it, and you can use it for yourself. So stay tuned. Look for that on our website here by tomorrow.
Great. And we'll have links. You can actually see links, gang, here at cpcbsa.org/COVID. It actually goes to the page that will have all this information on it. So feel free to send your parents there. We're going to post this webinar there too. And so we'll have all of this information here. This actually will be recorded also in audio. So you can just kind of listen to it and then digest it that way too. So kind of nice. Let me just check on a couple more questions here. So that answer, Sharon had that question if we had basically like a template. So that's great.
And then Keith's here. So Keith, I just want to make sure that we're using the right word. So the risk level is the county determination, which is updated every 2 weeks. Okay. And then we have tiers. So based on the risk level, you can determine which tier, you need to determine which tier you're going to do, regardless of the risk level, right? But the risk level is going to determine how you're going to interpret that tier to what you're doing. So for instance, you can meet indoors or outdoors, even in an extreme, because we're using the youth programs guidelines. But yeah, you as a unit need to decide how you want to do that. And again, our pediatrician, Dr. Kirsten Crowley.
So I'm going to give us a little news and information there, and then we'll. Sorry about that.
Kirsten Crowley recommends that meeting outdoors is the thing to do. That's her. I mean, her recommendation. She agrees that the indoor guidelines are fine, but she feels extremely confident with the outdoor guidelines for significantly mitigating risk.
Great.
Let's see, Tamara could go over the reason for parents not meeting again. For parents not meeting again. Oh, I don't remember saying parents can't meet. I know that we talked about Cub Scouts, and we talked about Scout BSA and older units. Forgive me that I didn't include, cruise ships and posts on everything. I just, that age group and above. Thank you. Can't hang out at the meeting. It's actually written in the guidelines in the state is that parents should just drop off only. Now, since our parents are often leaders, the leaders are considered staff, is how we interpreted it, and the parents are parents. And so unless the parent is needed for the meeting, if they did, then they become staff or leaders. And so, however, if they're just there to drop off, pick up and drop off, they can't interact with the meeting. There's no cohort that they belong to. And so they cannot interact with the cohorts as they are doing. Now, if you can, participate by, cohorting somewhere outside of the meeting space and still seeing it, that's great. And the like, but the guidelines, that's the guideline that we're trying to meet, is that we have interpreted that staff are unit leaders and that parents are parents. And so that's how we interpreted those guidelines. However, that being said, they said that the unit parents must only drop off, pick up and drop off. And we've added in there that if there is a place where parents can wait out the meeting, or can cohort amongst themselves, and you want to add that to the meeting plan, then you can. But remember, then the parents become their own cohort. I hope that makes sense. I know it's a little dirty for that one.
I think it's great. It is. It's so many parameters and whatnot, but it does make sense. We have one more question, kind of in a similar vein, and this, you've talked a bit about this already anyway, but if we go to a campground in a lower risk area, can we go as a troop with more than one patrol? So our troop would have more than 12 going, but split into 2 patrols of 10 or less. I understand we'd be having to be in separate areas, but we could at least be in the same place, quote unquote place, during the same weekend. Well,
so the answer to that question is one you're not going to like, which is it depends on where you're going. It's up to them to decide, right? We at Camp Meriwether can have 300 people at Meriwether, but we're not planning on having 300 people at Meriwether. We've decided a safer limit because we have our people to consider as well, right? And so each site will have different guidelines and rules. And so my guess is that if I was going to a state park, for instance, you would be able to sign up for a campsite, and they would dictate how many people can be in that campsite. So remember that the facility, the outdoor recreation facility, and guidelines are for establishments, literally facilities. So it's up to each facility to make that determination. But for instance, since we are one of them, I can tell you that you can have multiple cohorts come to camp at Meriwether starting March 1st. All right. However, each cohort will need to have a cohort champion, which you'll find out when you sign up. And then we will most likely spread your cohorts around camp, because it's been our experience that as much as you try to keep your cohorts from mixing, that they don't do a good job of it. So we have a policy that we're going to try to move your cohorts on either side of camp, so it makes it harder for you to mix your cohorts. Because understand this, what we're trying, at bare minimum, we have made a decision that, not that we want to get anybody sick, but if we do, we want to limit to one or a few people and not create a mass infection event. And mixing of cohorts is how you can go from 2 people infected to 20 people infected. And so we want to make sure that we keep those cohorts separate. And that guideline follows us through this entire thing.
That makes sense.
Let's see, you want me to take care of Jay here?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
So we have restricted all programming for council and district activities between now and June. And so we may see some OA activities happening in June as far as work parties. We do have some rules with regarding to doing work parties at our properties. Interestingly enough, those follow OSHA guidelines, which is a whole another set of guidelines for doing work parties on property. But we anticipate through working assumptions that things like Wood Badge, University of Scouting, and everything in the fall will return to in-person activities. And that Wood Badge will indeed follow the same guidelines that we anticipate to happen for summer camp. All right, let's see, Marie. Marie, the issue, if you can't operate within the guidelines, then I would not do the activity, or I would adjust the activity so you can maintain the guidelines. And so that's the only thing I can tell you. We are not into business as usual. I'll make it very clear. What we've done is open up the ability so that scouting can happen under certain restricted guidelines. So, so there's some activities that you just won't be able to do. I heard this piece of advice that came today that I really enjoyed, which was, you know, if you can't do the activity, try to capture the spirit of the activity. So, you know, whatever you're trying to do, oh, geez, COVID's just not going to allow that to happen. Well, okay, well, let's think this through. How can we get the spirit of that activity done while meeting the COVID guidelines? And I thought that was a wonderful piece of advice. All right, I'm sure you all have questions. I'm obviously, most of you people I recognize and know me, but I'm going to put my email here. I answer questions as often as I can. Many of you ping me, not regularly, but often or periodically or whatever. And so feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. If you're in the middle of a unit meeting and you're trying to figure your game plan out, and you want to shoot me your plan, you want me to review it and make recommendations, I'm happy to do that. I know there's 200 plus, you know, Scout BSA units. My guess is not all of you will email me, but I would be happy to be a part of any of that you want. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. All right, as we bring this to a close, now that we're past an hour, I'm going to hang on. So if you need to hang on, do. Just want to let you know that there's a group of people. We're planning on summer camp. We have this thing that we titled Working Assumptions. We are working collaboratively with groups in the state of Oregon and the governor's office and the Oregon Health Authority to make sure camp happens. So every Friday, every last Friday of the month at this noon webinar time, we will conduct a summer camp review. And we'll send an update mid-month each month to all those who are registered for summer camp. So feel free to check in with us. The last one was just a week ago, and you can find that at cpcbsa.org webinars. Jump on there. I'm still getting people who are asking for clarification on details through that, so feel free to do that as well. Long and short of it, I'd like to say this. I've been around scouting now since 1976. Now, one thing that's impressed upon me during all that time is that there is a miracle that happens in scouting. It's the miracle of people like you giving their time, energy, and love to help make sure that young people can learn how to grow, make good decisions, and jump into their life with a moral code to help them reach their fullest potential. That means each and every one of you are miracle workers. And for that, I thank you.
Great ending there, Todd. I hear. It's and I love what you said, that if you can't do the activity, how can we capture the spirit of the activity? I think that's just such a wonderful tip for all of us out there who are scoutmasters and leaders and whatnot. So thanks again to everybody who joined us this week. We'll have another one next week. We have not figured out the topic for next week. It's been a little crazy around here. So we'll figure that out. We'll send that to you. You'll actually receive all of this in an email, in your Compass Points email. So please check that, because a lot of people are getting those emails in spam filters. So please check that out. And again, like Todd said, you can go to cpcbsa.org/webinars for all the recordings and everything. Those actually, each webinar has a blog post that has all the links and all the important information there. And we try and top line it for you too, so you can kind of digest it pretty easily. So anyway, thanks so much, gang, for joining us. Really appreciate the questions. Really fantastic. And a great job out there to keep scouting. And we thank you so much for all of your service. And we will see you next time. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.